film is called My Week with Marilyn, but really it takes place over the course of what I guess was supposed to be a couple months. It takes place over the course of the entire shooting and production of a film. It was a real film from 1957 called The Prince and the Showgirl. The movie starred Marilyn Monroe and Sir Laurence Olivier. The My Week in the title really refers to a week somewhere during the production of this movie where a young guy working on the film, he was actually the third AD, that was his position, started to form a relationship with the star Marilyn Monroe. And it's based on a true story. I feel like it sounded really interesting as just a short synopsis, and I feel like it looked really interesting in the trailers, yet somehow as a full-length film, there was something lacking for me. A movie should take source material, whatever it is, fiction or nonfiction, and like take it to a new level and not dramatize the story in terms of like adding things to the story to make it more dramatic, but just kind of heightening the suspense and the intrigue in its film incarnation. And I don't feel like My Week with Marilyn did that. I didn't feel while watching it that I cared enough about the two main characters and their relationship, which is Colin Clark, the young guy, and Marilyn Monroe, of course. Another thing about the movie that wasn't working for me very well was the score. It was a mixture of an original score and some songs, just like a soundtrack. All I can say is it was one of those scores, it was just one of those scores that sounded like generic, like it sounded like that kind of canned, like movie soundtrack kind of thing, which I really don't like, because I know that like it's probably a budget issue to hire certain composers over others or to put emphasis on that. But for me, that's like a huge, huge part of movies. That's just my personal preference. But one of the things, as I think I mentioned, that was lacking for me was just the emotional punch. I feel like a score that was more emotional and a little more epic, just a little bit of like, you know, drama, even in the soundtrack, I think could have added for me. Another thing is there's a little subplot in the movie. I don't know if this part of the story was in that memoir that Colin Clark wrote. I think her name was Lucy. She's in the film hardly at all, but she's supposed to create like a little more tension or something. And she's like the third point in a love triangle, if that was what it was. I would call it like a love triangle sort of thing. But I just have this strong suspicion that like she was like an added character, you know, for like the purposes of the film only. But I don't know that. But she was played by Emma Watson. And you can find a person who thinks more highly of Emma Watson than I do. I felt like that part of it was like a little, it just seemed unnecessary. There's something about this movie that is overwhelmingly and incredibly positive, which is Michelle Williams' portrayal of Marilyn Monroe. Now, I'm not a Marilyn Monroe expert. She's not like my favorite iconic Hollywood figure or anything like that. Like, I know a lot of people are really into her and have like pictures of her on their wall. That's not really me, but I don't even know how to describe it. All I can say is when I was watching the film and I was seeing Michelle Williams, that's exactly the point. I did not feel like I was seeing Michelle Williams. Does she look physically exactly like Marilyn Monroe? No, of course not. But what you realize when you see a performance such as this always makes me think so much more about the fact that like people have such a spirit about them. And it's like everything about you is so much within your soul. And not to get too deep, but it really is incredible to see an actress or an actor, in this case an actress, like just expressing the soul of Marilyn. It really took me very, very little time for me to like buy Michelle Williams as Marilyn Monroe. I just like, you know what I mean? I just like bought it at a certain point. Generally, I felt like I was a little too bored while watching the film. I just feel like it didn't have enough emotional impact on me. And I'm like very, very easy. It's very easy to make me cry in films, like really easy. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. And as usual, if you like this review and you'd like to see more from me, please subscribe to my channel and have a great new year.